I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. It's too easy. I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy. Too easy. It's too easy. I've been there, done it, seen it. Boy, all that like Kenny. Still got crack, they fiendin'. Flow still hot like Phoenix.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Breaking Bet episode 9 here on this Thursday, April 6th. It is officially the start of April baseball here, and we're happy we could bring it to you. Joined with me is like my de facto co-host now, Mr. Matt Grissom. How are you, buddy? Thanks for taking the time.
Doing great. Ready to win some baseball bets today.
So this is like a little strange because typically we do our show on Friday, but this week – and I would probably suspect a lot of the time it's going to be this way for the rest of the season. We're going to be getting a lot of the series starting on Thursdays, which, you know, it's a little strange considering that it starts Thursday and ends Saturday for the most part. And sometimes we get even more of a mess with pitching matchups, Matt, because a lot of times, even though it's the start of a new series, some of these teams like to keep their best pitchers on the same rest. So if they started last Friday, they don't want them starting a day early. They want to take that full rest. So we might get some new guys and starting in this game one to kind of, you know, get that bridge, cross that bridge. And there could be some tremendous betting opportunities in cases like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see too with I know I talk about the Razorbacks more than probably anybody, but Will McIntyre's had the flu. So now you're talking about Hagen Smith, who's shifted into a utility role, and you've got Will McIntyre, who's been sick. That leaves Hunter Holland, who I'm assuming is going to start tonight down in Swayze Field. But, pitching in general is questionable outside of Wake Forest and, you know, the usual suspects, Tennessee, maybe even LSU may have an issue with Thatcher Hurd. But, yeah, pitching is definitely a key in all of our handicapping. And at this point of the season, you've really got to make sure you've got those pitchers right before you fire away at bets.
Yeah, completely agree. So we have a lot of games to get to. But before we do, just quick read off here. If you want all the player prop predictions that are part of Bet Karma Premium, go to betkarma.com/JohnnyVTV and sign up. NBA, college baseball, and NHL player props are included. So listen, Matt, the first game that I wanted to start off today, I just tweeted out, I think there might have been a mix-up at the sports book. So DraftKings hung a line out there for number 20 Miami at number 7 Virginia. And they have since removed it. And I did a little digging why. I was like, oh, maybe there's a rain out, and I didn't hear about it. So I went to the schedules, and it looked like the series actually starts tomorrow. I thought that was just a little strange, just a little bit of I guess maybe miscommunication or just a mistake on the sports traders' parts here. But seeing how I kind of had this game locked and loaded, even if it is for tomorrow, what's your general theme here considering these two teams? They're two powerhouses in the ACC. They have some good pitching, but a lot of bad pitching outside of a couple key guys, and they have offenses that can score. Do you think the Miami Hurricanes for game one, assuming it is tomorrow, with projected Carson Ligon against Brian Edgington, where do you see this matchup going?
Man, I laid it with Virginia at -175. I just think they're probably the second most sound team in the ACC outside of Wake Forest. I liked what I saw last weekend again with Edgington, and I'm just going to stay with the Cavaliers here. I know it's a juicy price to lay on a team that really hasn't been that tested this season, but I don't think Miami is very good. I think they got lucky and had a really good outing all 3 days in that series a couple weeks ago. But I just think Virginia is head and shoulders up there with Wake Forest as far as the ACC goes.
Yeah, so this is where we're going to have differing opinions because, quite honestly, I don't agree with you. This is one of the rare times that we don't see eye to eye. I think Virginia is overrated. I don't think they were that good last year. I think, they were benefiting from an easy-ish schedule to start this season. Some of the teams that they played, like an NC State that was supposed to be better than what they are, really haven't panned out. And because of that, it's made them look a lot better than what they are. I think, the series last weekend was a big disappointment against Virginia Tech. They take a good game one behind their ace, Brian Edgington, who has been great this year. He definitely has. But we saw how questionable the rest of this staff is, how questionable this bullpen is. This offense couldn't do damage. They could not score with runners in scoring position and runners on base. They left a small village on the base paths over the weekend. And, I understand it was an in-state rivalry with Virginia Tech. And even though Virginia Tech's not really that good, this is like just one of those – it's one of those rivalries. It's like, to a lesser degree, Duke, North Carolina. They always play each other tough, but I saw a lot of flaws in this team. So the fact is, even with a guy like Edgington on the mound, I like the way Miami's been playing. I'm not going to hold that sweep against Wake Forest on them too hard because a lot of teams are going to be getting swept by Wake Forest. They're head and shoulders above everybody else right now, along with LSU. And I think Miami definitely has a chance to steal the series. I definitely think they take at least one game. And with Carson Ligon on the mound, who, he had a good bounce back coming off of Wake Forest. And I would expect that to continue. Virginia's got a couple boppers in the lineup. They got Jake Geloff. They have Kyle Teal. But I really do have questions about this team. So I thought Miami coming into tonight or tomorrow, whatever it is, at a plus 140 price is just too good to not take a shot on because – the Hurricanes do have boppers in that lineup. They have guys that are difference makers. And, in typical fashion, I could expect Miami to pull off like a 5-2, 5-3 low scoring tight victory that's decided late in the game. And, there's no team, in my opinion, other than maybe Wake Forest that has a bigger advantage in the late innings than the Miami Hurricanes because they have the best closer and reliever in all of college baseball, and that is Andrew Walters.
Yeah, I think you make a solid argument. I mean, that Virginia Tech series with Virginia was pretty embarrassing the way that they lost. I felt like they should have swept them, to be honest, but Miami did sweep them 3 weeks ago. So you may have some merit there with Miami. I don't hate it. I think ultimately, though, being on the road, Miami's going to struggle, and Virginia really needs to take this series.
So I last night, as I typically do, the night before games start, I get involved. I get action in because I don't want the lines to move unless I think, when I take dogs, we're going to get a better price here. So I had Miami in 2 parlays today. So obviously I think those are void and just I stick with whatever else that I have in those tickets. So I suppose if the tickets win today and Miami loses tomorrow, then maybe I dodged the bullet. But, that remains to be seen. A lot of things have to happen before we can make that kind of a judgment call. But, Matt, let's move on here to your team. I think we're both in agreement this is probably one of, if not our best plays of the day. That's Arkansas. Minus 115 money line, evenly matched with the Ole Miss Rebels, also minus 115. I'm really questionable about these prices. I think this is a big mistake from the sports books. Do you see Arkansas not only winning today, but sweeping the series?
It's all going to come down to pitching. And I know that's something I always say, I feel like. But in this case, when you're missing Brady Tiger, you're missing possibly missing Will McIntyre for getting over the flu, that's going to matter. And, going in slim to try to beat the defending national champs is, yes, they're 1-8 in the SEC. Yes, Ole Miss has looked like absolute dog crap this season. However, it's still SEC baseball, and it's still traveling on the road in a hostile environment. It worries me. It worries me more tomorrow and Saturday. I feel like Hunter Holland does not have another back-to-back performance where he gets shelled. So I did lay the 115 with Arkansas today, and I feel very confident in that. That's actually a 2-unit play for me. Tomorrow remains to be seen. I don't know. If you catch the Rebels at a big plus money price, given the shakiness of just Arkansas's pitching depth right now, I may have to to lean Ole Miss, but I think ultimately Arkansas does walk away with the series just because we've got that utility guy in Hagen Smith that if he needs to pitch, 2 or 3 innings a day for 2 of these 3 games, he could probably come in and pump it. So that being said, today Arkansas should win, and I'm rolling with them minus 115.
Yeah, Arkansas is one of the best plays on my card as well. I think for all the reasons you just said, the pitching matchup is so key. And, Will McIntyre hasn't really been that good, to be honest. And Will McIntyre historically for Arkansas has been what Hagen Smith now is, the utility guy. If you need him to make a start on a Sunday, he's your guy. If you need him to go 3 innings, 4 innings out of the pen, he can do that. But being thrust into the Saturday role right now, it hasn't been great for him. He was not good against Alabama, couldn't locate. They were jumping all over him. And I think ultimately here, what you said with Hunter Holland went 4 innings, 7 runs against Alabama last week. Before that, he was cruising. The kid looked lights out. He went toe-to-toe with Paul Skeens, outpitched Paul Skeens, was the big reason why LSU ended up losing their first Friday night game with Paul Skeens on the mounds. I don't think he has 2 in a row. And, Ole Miss's power right now is their offense. But even still, the one thing that I really went back and looked at to give me the decisive edge, because quite frankly, I think even on the road, Arkansas should be like a minus 145, minus 150 favorite in this first game. When Ole Miss got swept by Vanderbilt is one of, if not the only team that deploys 3 lefty starters in a rotation. Hunter Holland, who's been a really good lefty by his own merit, can piggyback off what Vanderbilt did. They shut down Ole Miss a few weeks ago when they got swept. So Vanderbilt starters in those 3 games went 20 innings, only allowed 4 runs the whole series, and 11 hits. So it just kind of goes to show that this Rebels team is vulnerable against good lefty pitching. And that's what Hunter Holland brings to the table. I don't think, coming off of a bad start, I feel like this is a big bounce back area for Holland today. And I would expect that, keeping Ole Miss off balance. I understand they're 1-8 in SEC play. That's why I do believe they take 1 game in this series, but I don't think it's today. I think the Razorbacks, who kind of had a close call last week with Alabama, they're going to come ready to play this time around. And I feel like they're going to come out and pump today. And minus 115 is it's too short of a price. I think the Razorbacks roll today.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, too, how much of that is just still the respect that the book has for the defending national champs. I mean, to me, they're
still 12-1. They're still 12-1,
yeah,
which is it's ludicrous.
Yeah, and you can kind of use the futures market to determine just how strong the books feel like these teams are. But looking at Ole Miss, I mean, they don't have anything that they had last year. And that's not to say that they can't turn it on and finish the season in the SEC above 500. But looking at their lineup, looking at their pitching, unless Hunter Elliott and DeLucia walk back through that door, and Hunter Elliott has an opportunity to, but this isn't the same Ole Miss Rebels team as last year.
Right.
And I just don't think that they're worth this price right now that they're getting.
No, they're getting too much respect in the market. And I think one of the other big reasons why I liked Arkansas today is just how big of an advantage they have in the pitching department for the starters on the mound, because Ole Miss is forced to put, and we've talked about this so many times over the last month or so, they forced Jack Doherty to become the Friday guy. Jack Doherty is a Saturday guy at absolute best. More along the lines, he's probably a Sunday guy. He's pitching to a 5.8 ERA right now. He's been getting battered against some of the better teams in the SEC, like Vanderbilt, Florida. And, Arkansas isn't that flashy team, but they have some really good players. Tavian Josenberger single-handedly won one of their games last weekend against Alabama, robbing a home run, hitting nonstop base hits. Like, this kid was all over the place. And, you got a guy like Jared Wagner, who right now looks like he's on pace for 25 home runs. I just think, considering how bad Ole Miss's pitching is, it's just too much of a disadvantage for the Rebels today. And, that's not to say, like I said, I think they will take a game. And maybe it is tomorrow with Grayson Saunier, the freshman on the mound, against who knows for the Razorbacks. But this is just too good of a price to not capitalize while you have it. Because if Arkansas does what we think they can do and win like 8-1, 9-2, you're might see the Razorbacks out to like minus 155 tomorrow.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that line moved. That I made the line Arkansas minus 140. So when I saw Arkansas minus 115, I had to jump on it.
Yeah, agreed. So going from one great SEC matchup, we have another one here. This is the one that I have circled again, not only because they're my favorite team, but
wait, Johnny, are you gonna talk about the Mississippi State Alabama series?
That's well, I'm not. I'm not. We'll get to that one later. But we have a great pitching duel again. We have Tennessee and Florida. The Volunteers are at home. They're a meaty minus 145 against the Florida Gators, who did not play well against Auburn. And I have a tough time right now trusting the Volunteers because as good as they are, even though they're nothing what they were last year, they're finding ways to lose games. This is not the same team. Like they should have beat LSU last Friday or last Thursday. That game should have been 2-2 going into the ninth inning. And Seth Halverson drops an inning-ending routine ground ball from second base, which leads to 3 runs. And that completely changes everything. And I think here we're also looking at a guy like Brandon Sproat for Florida who got shelled by Auburn in the first inning last week. He walked the ballpark. And I feel like considering you have these two teams right now who are at crossroads in the season, I think this is a really important series when you're considering litmus tests. So do you think Tennessee is worth this minus 145? Do you think with Chase Dollander on the mound, they take this one home?
Here's the thing. I played Tennessee minus 145. My co-host is a Gators fan. He played 115. The problem is this line. I mean, you've got a 50-cent differential. It's kind of greedy by the books. I mean, minus 145 in a football game, you're probably going to get plus 130, plus 135 on the other side. Only getting the plus 115, I would have laid it with or taken Florida had I gotten like plus 125 or better. But in this case, I just feel like the book has the line right on the Tennessee side, just not on the Florida side. So ultimately, I had to pull the trigger and back Chase Dollander. I think he's going to come out. They're back at home. They need this series badly, especially after almost getting swept by LSU last weekend until they turned it on. But I feel like they're going to get clicking, and Florida is just too inconsistent right now. I feel like if Tennessee can get this game won, then they'll own the series. So my bet reflected that.
Yeah, I think, it is hard going against Florida when you're getting plus money like this against an inconsistent team like Tennessee. But at the end of the day, we're backing the best pitcher in baseball, college baseball, or right now this season, probably the 1B to Paul Skeens. And I think when you're getting a Chase Dollander at minus 145, even against a potent Gators lineup, I just think you have to take it. And I think ultimately for the Volunteers, more so than the Gators, this is a huge series because they're now number 11. They've fallen quite a bit since that sweep against Mizzou. If they lose this series, they might go from number 11 to like number 15, number 16. And obviously there's a lot of time to make it up. But man, if there could be a scenario where they're not hosting a regional. And being at Lindsey Nelson Stadium is such a home field advantage for them. It's like Fenway Park for college baseball. It's a small ballpark, but they pack it in tight. It gets loud, it gets rowdy, and they feed off that energy. And I think the Tennessee Volunteers are going to take the series. I'm not sure which game that the Gators are going to take because I don't think the Gators are going to get swept. They're going to take one game. And I haven't decided if it's going to be Saturday or Sunday. I'd probably say Saturday with Waldrop on the mound, or I should say Friday, game 2. So I think, we get out to a nice start here with Chase Dollander at this minus 145 price on a Thursday night. And, Brandon Sproat hasn't showed me enough. And the big advantage here in this matchup is the bullpen. Florida has a terrible bullpen. They have a couple arms that are pitching well, but outside of that, it's a struggle. So, again, the Tennessee formula has to be Dollander comes out, absolutely dots this capable Gators lineup, and this has to be, at bare minimum, a tight game going into the 7th inning because once that point happens, it's significant flip in favor of Tennessee. So if that happens, I think the minus 145 should be home.
Yep. I'm with you. I think Tennessee takes game 1 and 3. I think they drop game 2.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting handicap throughout the weekend. This is definitely going to be one of those series. I think every game might come down to the wire, and I probably would expect Jack Caglianone to hit at least 2 home runs this series in that ballpark. That's very favorable for hitters.
Yeah, and look, the Chase Dollander is very hittable this year, so it may not be surprised. It won't surprise me at all if this is actually a higher scoring game, but I think ultimately Tennessee's at a crossroads right now where they've got to get a series win and a big one at that, and Florida does that for them. So it's going to be a tough season if they can't get this win today.
Yeah, this is a crossroads point at their season, even in early April. This is like in blackjack when you're doubling down. It's a swing bet. If you win, it's gonna catapult them on a good trajectory. And I would say if they take the series against Florida, you're going to see them back in the top 10 this week, next week, maybe the top 8. And if they lose, they're probably going to be more along the lines of 15, 16, 17. So this could be the difference ultimately of like 8 to 10 spots, depending on how the series goes. So Tennessee absolutely needs it. Florida could use it, but they don't need it because regardless, Florida's still going to be considered a top 5 team, even if they lose this weekend, despite the fact that they might fall to number 6 on the rankings. I actually have Florida falling a spot after last week just because I don't like what I saw against Auburn. And, I think that might carry over this weekend. I really do.
Yeah, and just one final note, Brandon Sproat last year against Tennessee, he pitched 6 innings. He gave up 5 hits and 3 runs. Only struck out 4, which I know Tennessee was a little bit different of a team last year, but I kind of like that back in the balls even more tonight.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get moving on to honestly, this might be the best matchup of the entire weekend. LSU, number 1 against number 6, South Carolina. LSU was minus 175 last night on the open. Woke up this morning, they're out to minus 205. Paul Skeens day, that's typical. That is pretty much how it happens. Do you think the Tigers are worthy of being minus 205 today against a team like South Carolina, even with Skeens on the mound?
I may eat my words, but I like the Gamecocks today. When this game came out last night and I saw LSU minus 175, I couldn't pull the trigger for whatever reason. I felt like it was the price was right. Okay. Now it's minus 205 and you can get South Carolina plus 165. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I got it at plus 155 just because I felt like all the money started rolling in on LSU. And like I said at the beginning of doing these shows, I don't think Paul Skeens gets a loss, but he didn't get a loss against Arkansas and they still lost game 1. I think South Carolina is a better hitting team than Arkansas, and they're at home. Will Sanders coming off a week where he rested mentally. I feel like the Gamecocks are going to come out and take game 1 of this series.
Yeah, so you know what? I was really struggling with this. I had, and I don't know if you saw this. So for anybody that doesn't know, and I every week I talk about this, I always give out picks the night before the game starts. The lines have been coming out earlier. For the first month and a half, the lines weren't coming out until like 11 a.m. Eastern time the day of. But now what's happening is 11 p.m. the night before. But now what happens is they're starting to release these lines at like 6 p.m. Eastern time the night before. And, it's important to get ahead. And when I saw this and I gave out my plays last night for today, I was TBD on this game. And, I can't wrap my head around it because I really believe this could be the first series loss for LSU. South Carolina is legit. They are, in my opinion, one of the 9 teams that have a realistic chance to win the whole thing. And the problem is, though, it's hard for me to fade Paul Skeens the way he's been pitching, despite how potent and elite this Gamecocks offense is. So for me, my true feeling was when I looked at the pitching matchup, I still have to give the edge tonight to LSU. And it's not because of Paul Skeens. It's because South Carolina is throwing their ace, Will Sanders, who has not been good. that kid has been getting shelled, and he didn't pitch at all last weekend. I think, South Carolina wanted to give him a weekend off just to kind of regroup. And, he didn't have a good start against Mizzou the weekend before, and it's kind of been spiraling for him. So maybe this kid steps up tonight and answers the call. This is a guy who's supposed to be a top 20, top 25 pick this year in the first round for the MLB draft. I can't pull the trigger on South Carolina tonight. I have LSU in a couple money line parlays. I think they find a way this evening, but I really think South Carolina can take games 2 and 3. I think they have the pitching advantage on Saturday with Noah Hall against Ty Floyd, who got lit up by Tennessee. And now what I found out is LSU took Thatcher Hurd out of the starting spot, at least for this Sunday, and they're throwing Christian Little, who has really good stuff, but he has not been sharp this year. He's been off with location. He's not been consistent. So I think there's a real chance here. LSU, I'm looking for them to take tonight, and then I'm looking to back South Carolina Friday and Saturday. I think really they have a chance to take this series. No questions asked about it. And I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks. But tonight, I unfortunately have to put LSU on my money line parlays. I'm not playing this one straight up. I'm not laying 205 because I'm not that confident. But if you're asking me which way the wind's blowing, I think it blows LSU's direction tonight.
So South Carolina put out their starting rotation, and they've switched it up. They went, like you said, and we talked about, Will Sanders is going to start tonight. And then Jack Mahoney, which is their third-day starter, is going to start on Friday. And the next day starter was TBA. So that means Noah Hall is not on that list. And I would not be surprised if South Carolina brings in Noah Hall to kind of clean up if Will Sanders starts to struggle, or even if he wants to close out the game. I mean, I think South Carolina is definitely putting all their eggs in one basket that they've got to win tonight. So it makes me even more confident in the Gamecocks. That may backfire in my face, but I had to take it at the plus 155 price I got.
Well, here's the thing. We're in typical anticipation of how the line moves throughout the series for the weekends. We're looking at LSU to get a nice win tonight. And obviously, the books have probably adjusted to the Paul Skeens effect with the handicapping. But if LSU wins, let's say the LSU wins tonight 7-2, 7-3. Tomorrow, they would probably open around minus 190, 195. And by the time game time starts, we might see LSU out to like minus 210, 215, which means South Carolina will be in this plus 160 to plus 175 range. And then that's where you grab them. So that's why tonight's game is so important on how it goes. It's not just who wins. It's just who wins by how much, because we want, in the grand scheme, if we're looking at South Carolina for the series, we want LSU to win big tonight. And then we want South Carolina to be an even bigger dog going forward for the next 2 games. Because like I said, I think they do have the advantage in games 2 and 3. And then we grab them at plus 170, plus 175. And we're looking at a real profit here because we talked about this. LSU is number 1. They're a daddy wagon. They're possibly might have the top 2 picks in the draft in July. But they are beatable. They are not invincible. They have problem areas. Mainly their bullpen. It is an issue. And I think here, this is one where we can look to take advantage of a big plus money price. And this is where I wish, books would start hanging series prices out there, because I'd probably say South Carolina would be plus 375, plus 350 to win the series. To me, that's worth it.
Yeah. I mean, you're basing that off the opening day line of minus 205. Yeah, that you're probably right. I mean, but like you said, you want LSU to win this game so that the line is bigger tomorrow. I feel like if you think South Carolina is going to take the series, you're probably not going to get a bigger price than getting South Carolina plus 165 in game 1 than you will for the rest of the series, whether they win or lose. I mean, I think
you don't think you don't think the scheme, like it's not just it schemes a lot of it, but there is the LSU effect that they are the consensus number 1 team in America for like the last 8 weeks, or 6 weeks, whatever it is, I feel like the number would get out a little bit bigger depending on tonight's result. Like if South Carolina wins tonight, we're talking a different game. If the Gamecocks pull it out tonight, we're going to see these prices completely flip-flop tomorrow. What I'm saying is if LSU gets a good, convincing win tonight, then they're going to be like, oh, they're so good. They're going to – this line should, at the bare minimum, be similar to what it was at the Open for Game 1.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Maybe at the Open. But I don't think you're going to get LSU anywhere north of minus 200 in any other game in this series, which is going to mean South Carolina's price is going to be down as well.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Some of the line movement hasn't exactly worked out how I projected it would, but it's remained to be seen. This is definitely, I would say, the best game of the night, with Tennessee and Florida being a close second. So if you have time tonight, I definitely think these are the occasions where this is better than anything that MLB has going on this evening. So I would be sure to tune in if you are available to. So speaking of here, Matt, we have the number 4 Vanderbilt Commodores laying a meaty minus 190 against the Mizzou Tigers, who all of a sudden have fallen off the face of the earth since that sweep of the Tennessee Volunteers a few weeks ago. Do you think Mizzou takes any games, or do you think Vandy just clean sweeps them to get to 12-0 in SEC play?
Yeah, with the injuries or whatever Missouri's dealing with, I just think Vanderbilt is coming along too hot right now. I think they get another sweep. I threw Vanderbilt in a parlay with Texas money line. It pays out plus 127. Feel pretty confident in that. I think Vanderbilt's just too good. And, Missouri peaked way too early in the season. And now Vanderbilt, they may be doing the same. We'll see. But I think Vanderbilt's the far better team. Think they get the easy sweep.
Yeah, so this was also one of my favorite plays for betkarma.com. I put out an article today. I'll save you the suspense. Arkansas was 1, Vanderbilt was 2. I think that's more like 1A, 1B. I think Vanderbilt right now, they're rolling. And you know what, Matt, maybe we were wrong on Vanderbilt. But then again, they haven't really played any of these top teams in the SEC. They played Georgia, they played Mississippi State, they're playing Mizzou. We may have been wrong. Maybe. It's a little too early to tell, but they've definitely exceeded the expectations that we've had to this point in the season, that's for sure. So far, through the first seven plus weeks, we were both wrong on account of the Vanderbilt Commodores. They look phenomenal. And I think when you're looking at this series, minus 190 isn't big enough. You have Carter Holton, who's been unreal. He's got 3 quality starts in his last 4 tries. He's got a 2.6 ERA. The kid's pumping right now. He's going against Logan Lunsford, who's a midweek guy for Mizzou. Their regular guy, Chandler Murphy, isn't throwing today. He's not throwing until Saturday. So this guy, Lunsford, who's a freshman, has never faced this caliber of a team. He hasn't made a weekend series start ever. And now you're throwing him to the fire against the hottest team in all of college baseball, or at least the SEC. Vanderbilt is 12-0 in the SEC. They're on or 9-0 in the SEC, and they're on a 12-game win streak. They are finding different ways to win. They have scored at least 25 runs in each of the last 3 weekend series. And then you have a guy like Carter Holton who's just been lights out. I think for me, the minus 190, while I don't like laying these big prices, I think in this case it is worth it because Mizzou has just been getting their brains bashed in. They have not played good baseball. And I think ultimately when they're down right now, because Mizzou was projected one of the worst teams in the SEC before the season started, I think you have to keep taking advantage of that trend. Like I'm rocking the Vanderbilt shirt today. I think they win, and I think they win big. I think they have a good chance to sweep the series. And I think if Mizzou is to win a game, I don't think it's going to be until Saturday when they have Chandler Murphy going against Devin Futrell. So yeah. I'm rocking with Vanderbilt money line. I'm rocking with Vanderbilt in parlays. They're all over the place for me today. Vanderbilt is one of my best plays of the day because I just think the way they're playing right now, you don't want to get in front of an oncoming locomotive when it's rolling like it is. So I think Vanderbilt to the bank today for sure.
Yep. Let's get this sweep for Vanderbilt, and then let's fade them next week when they host South Carolina because I think they're going to start losing. I mean, they face South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Florida to close out the season. I think those are all series that they're capable of losing. So I'm not ready to, Ben Upton it and put Vanderbilt as I was listening to 11.7 and they were making the case that Vanderbilt should actually be the number one team in the country because LSU hadn't swept anybody. But you look at that strength of schedule, their RPI, LSU is far deserving of that number one rank. And I think Vanderbilt may just be peaking a little too early. So,
yeah, I agree with that. And I think you brought out a good point that I wanted to touch on. And what we need our viewers to understand is this. You look at what you have on the schedule right now. So obviously you have Vanderbilt against Mizzou. This should be a series that they pull out another sweep. But it's important to understand their remaining schedule. So you just referenced that they're going to have to face some of the best teams in the country over the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks to close out the regular season. This is where you have to take advantage of the Commodores when you can get them. Because, moving forward, we might not be able to get this number on them. So it's important to understand that we're on Vanderbilt right now, but we might be looking to fade them over the next month plus because they're going to have some real tough games against tough pitchers. And, we're not going to get too many of those spots where we think they're going to be pulling out money line wins, upsets, favorites, whatever the case is. So I like that you brought that up. And I just wanted to make sure that we kind of touched on that because that's an important part of handicapping in this sport because a lot of this stuff is, these teams are good, but they're not playing anybody. And what happens when they start playing legit opponents?
Yeah, and Ben, going back to give them some credit about something, Ben and Dimitri always talk about every year it's the hot, cold, hot theory. So a team, they start out really hot, and then they go through a little midseason lull where they cool down, but then they get hot again. So the time to bet a futures, if you like a team like Vanderbilt right now, who is hot early in the season, wait, because if they are going to win it all, historically speaking, they will go on a cold streak. And what's that line going to do? It's going to go up. You're going to get a better price on them. And I think South Carolina is another team to look at. I don't know if Wake and LSU are going to hit that midseason lull like that. But, just look at the schedule as a whole before you start placing futures bets because I really think here in about a month, you're going to be able to get some of these teams at a better price just based on what their series results are when they start facing a little tougher schedule.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt right now, for reference, is 18-1 on DraftKings. That's solid, but if they start going on a little losing streak here when they're playing the LSUs and the Tennessees and the Floridas, I would imagine we could be looking from 18-1 now till, let's say, the middle of May. They might be sitting in 24-1 territory if they're not playing up to par. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is something that you have to look at. I think there's potential, if you like Vanderbilt, to wait on them until before the tournament starts. And then, you kind of see once the dust settles, you have a lot more information. And listen, chances are I can't imagine them getting higher than 12-1, 10-1 on DraftKings.
Yeah.
By this point, it's just, it's too difficult to move that up. It took Wake Forest over 4 weeks to move from 15-1 to 10-1. That just happened. Wake Forest has been sweeping everybody. It took them over a month to move from 15-1 to 10-1. I mean, Some of these markets are really, really slow. And I think it's important to note that. So
I will say too, South Carolina, I know I said they may hit a lull and you could get a better price. DraftKings has South Carolina plus 2,500. If they beat LSU in this upcoming series, I guarantee you that price nearly gets cut in half. Mm-hmm. So if you like the Gamecocks, I might jump on them now at plus 2,500 because if they lose to LSU, even if they get swept, I don't think that moves much. But if they win, like I said, I think it gets cut in half.
I agree. For whatever reason, South Carolina up here in Connecticut, they were like somewhere between 20 and 25-1 in every book. And when I was in Jersey, I saw South Carolina 25-1, and like for a couple weeks, I don't know why, I don't know if it was a glitch, but I was getting South Carolina at 50-1. And I didn't really understand if they doubled the price on them. I wasn't really sure what was going on. So I was like, wow, I got them at 50-1. Like, I got to take them. So I have a little piece on South Carolina because I couldn't believe it. But I agree with you. I think the Gamecocks right now at 25-1, if they were to win the series against LSU, they're going to be at least 15-1 heading into next week. So definitely would look at that one right now. And, Matt, we got a couple more here. We have the Washington Huskies at the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona just got done being swept by Oregon. Washington didn't fare too well against Oregon State. Do you think the Huskies pull out a nice plus money upset on a Thursday night?
I don't know. I'm so down on the Pac-12 this year. Washington kind of breaks my heart. Every time I bet on them, I feel like they lose. And then when I don't bet on them, that's when they win at the big plus money price. Do you have a lean either way on this one?
Yeah. They've been killing me, but I'm going to go Washington. I'm going to keep hitting Washington until they win. So I was expecting TJ Nichols today. I haven't really been following Arizona as closely as some of the other teams. So I didn't understand he has been struggling a lot. They yanked him out of the rotation, at least for this weekend. So he's not making a start. And I like this line even more. So it's 160. It actually moves to plus 150. Washington is keeping Kiefer Lord on full rest, and he's throwing tomorrow. Now, they're throwing – Washington is Stu Flensland III, who's been pretty good this year. He had a bad outing against Oregon State. I think it's a bounce-back spot for him. Now, Washington, they're facing Daniel Susak's younger brother. Daniel Susak was a first-round catcher last year. He's one of the first off the board to the Oakland A's. His little brother, Anthony, who hasn't really been that sharp this year, he's getting the start tonight. And so I think how I like this, I love Washington to keep taking advantage of Arizona. Arizona's down this year, man. I don't think they're gonna recover. So I'm taking the Huskies tonight, and I'm taking them again tomorrow. So my hope is, and my expectation, if the Huskies pull off this upset today, then what's going to happen is tomorrow they're probably going to open in like the plus 130, plus 135 range with Kiefer Lord on the mound. And I got to be honest, it wouldn't be surprising to see Washington even lower than that. So I'm riding with the Huskies, games 1 and games 2. I think they take the series from Arizona and finally make me look like somebody who knows what they're talking about for a change.
Yeah, I like it. I just looked at the pitching advanced analytics, and Washington definitely has the advantage there.
Yeah, so we're going with the Huskies. I think, Washington has a chance. They had a really nice series win a couple weeks ago against UCLA. I don't think they're top 25 worthy, but I think they could get a solid spot in the regionals in the draw if they keep stacking up wins. I don't buy the Huskies as a real threat at all, but they're definitely a team where you can take advantage of because they're a Pac-12 team that a lot of people don't know about. And, they're capable of playing pretty solid baseball at times, just they're a little bit inconsistent. So there's a lot of times you could have spots to pick and choose when to bet them. And I think this weekend we're getting 2 of those back to back.
Yeah. Love to hit a plus money dog for sure, especially in the Pac-12 where I feel like you're going to get a lot of upsets just because of the inconsistency. I joke that it's always the first team to score 5 runs. They're going to win it. And I think Washington can do it against Arizona.
So bringing up one of our last series here, we have the Oklahoma State Cowboys against the TCU Horned Frogs, a Big 12 matchup here that ultimately this could be the battle of who wins the Big 12. Like we know TCU has kind of fell off the map a little bit as of late. And, you still got Texas Tech up there, but do you think Oklahoma State is the class of the Big 12? And do you think that they take this opening game against the Horned Frogs?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think after the first weekend with the Classic down in Arlington, Oklahoma State looked bad. TCU looked unbeatable, and they've pretty much swapped roles. Ben Abram, I'm assuming, is getting the start tonight. He's 4-1 on the year. He's got a 5.57 ERA, but his advanced analytics are better than that. and then our guy, Jerron Watts-Brown, going tomorrow. I think they pick up the series win because of those two guys, and if they can get the sweep with Hendry going, I just think Oklahoma State is better at hitting the ball. They're better at pitching right now. TCU started really good with Ryan Vanderhey. He's just kind of fallen off. Everybody's getting hits on him. Cole Klecker, Cam Brown, same way. I think Oklahoma State takes the series pretty handedly.
Yeah, so I like the fact that Oklahoma State has kind of pushed Jerron Watts-Brown into the Game 2 role. He's been pretty much going on Saturdays for the most part. And, even though it's Friday, tomorrow, it's really Saturday because it's Game 2. We handicapped this series perfect last week between Oklahoma State and Texas, which was a doozy. We were spot on with Texas on Friday night with Lucas Gordon on the mound. And then we flipped over to Oklahoma State on Saturday with Jerron Watts-Brown. All he did was pile up double-digit punchies. Looked fantastic. So, TCU is a weird team. I don't really understand what's going on with them. Their pitching is bad, and we kind of talked about that even back in February. So I think Oklahoma State does take game 1 and 2. I think they keep rolling here. I feel like we're getting a good price with the -120. I do feel like the TCU best chance to win one is tonight with Ryan Vanderhey on the mound if he can get his groove back. But realistically speaking, this should probably be Oklahoma State tonight at -120. And then tomorrow, if they do what we think they do and win today, they're probably going to be like -140, 145 tomorrow. So I think it's fair game on the Cowboys in games 1 and 2. Not really leaning anything on game 3 yet, but I do think the Cowboys are the right side here, and I think they continue to be the front runner for the Big 12.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point I want to touch on. The way that I handicap this is not only by the individual games, but that is a part of it. But I think even bigger than that, you look at like Arkansas and Florida last year or last week. Good Lord, they both dropped game 1 of their series. But I looked at it as a whole. Arkansas and Florida, I thought they would win both of their series. So if they drop game 1, guess what? They have to win game 2 and game 3. So that became an auto bet for me, and I parlayed Arkansas and Florida both times. So in this case, Oklahoma State, if they drop tonight, but we think they're going to win the series, then that would mean Jerron Watts-Brown, who's pretty much automatic anyways, up there with Chris Flynn for Boston College, they're going to be an auto bet tomorrow, and then just to ride out the prediction, go ahead and bet them on Saturday to take the series as well. So just, you always have to look at the broader landscape of it in college baseball, because you may have a team that gets blown out 16-0 game 1 and then comes back and wins a 1-0 game. I mean, that's just how college baseball is. It's how baseball is in general. But, yeah, I wanted to go on that rant real quick just to kind of help listeners understand the handicap. Just because somebody gets blown out, it doesn't mean the handicap was bad. They probably just threw out a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of game time. He got shelled some more. The score looked worse. You got to shake it off and go on to the next game. Stick to your handicap for the series in a whole.
Couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. And so I haven't taken anything with Oklahoma State so far today. I would lean with them. I'm debating on it. I might throw Oklahoma State money line on the card. That game kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern time today. I'll probably put it on the card just because I think we were spot on with everything we talked about. And ultimately, the Cowboys should get the series win. So it just makes sense to back them every day. So you mentioned Boston College, and this is kind of the theme of the show. Louisville, Boston College kicks off one of the first games today. It's at 6 p.m. Boston College is plus 140 on the money line to Louisville's minus 175. Now, typically, I know what we've done in the past several weeks. We don't bet Boston College in game 1 because we wait until game 2 when Chris Flynn is on the mound. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Chris Flynn has been arguably the best pitcher in the country this year after Paul Skeens. You go take a look at his numbers. That kid has been putting up enough stats where he very well might be considered one of the top pitchers in not only the ACC, but the entire nation this season. So I think ultimately
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think maybe outside of Sean Sullivan, he is the best second-day pitcher in college baseball.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think he's a second day only because that's how they set up the rotation. So I think what's important for people to understand, just because a team has a pitcher like a Chris Flynn, a dominant pitcher who's like money every time out, some of what they do, they save their best guy for day two. So like the perfect example would be Oklahoma State. Ron Watts Brown is their best pitcher. He is their ace. But the way they stack for game two. So now what that does for some of these teams is if they're able to steal Friday night or game one with their, let's say, second best pitcher, now they're playing with house money because they have their best guy on the mound for game two to potentially take the series in the first two games. And on the other hand, if they lose the first game, now they have their best guy as the stopper to at least try and even up the series. So that's exactly. A lot of times what teams will do in college baseball. And you'll see a lot of that in June. Once we get to the postseason, a lot of times the teams will throw their second best guy in the first game and save their ace as either the stopper or somebody that's just trying to take the series, in two games. So that's the thing with Boston College. And, I actually don't hate the Eagles today. I think the Eagles take the series. I'm not high on Louisville. I think Louisville's overrated. Louisville lost 3 studs from last year. They lose 2 guys that combined for almost 50 home runs with Dalton Rushing and Cam Masterman. They lose their best pitcher, Jared Poland. They really don't have a lot of firepower. And I think Louisville's vulnerability has shown over the last few weeks. They lost a series to Notre Dame. Meanwhile, Boston College has been playing absolutely outrageous. So I do think BC, if you want to take a shot on them today at plus 140, I think that is a good bet. But I definitely like them tomorrow against Louisville with Chris Flynn on the bump.
Yep, that's one of my bets I gave out too. I did only play it as a half unit because regardless, tomorrow I'm going back to a full unit on Chris Flynn.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt, before we wrap up here, is there any other games that we didn't touch on that that really tickle your fancy?
The only other one I think is I did lay it with Alabama minus 140. It opened minus 135. I didn't get the bet in time, but I think now it's up to like minus 150 or minus 155. I just think the Crimson Tide, with what they did against Arkansas last week with Ben Hess on the mound, I think they're a better team than Mississippi State through and through. And going back home after that gut-wrenching series loss against Arkansas, I like what Bohannon's doing. I know he mocked the hog call and got a rise out of everybody, but I think Alabama's a pretty solid team, and Mississippi State just didn't it this year. So I backed the Crimson Tide, and I like that up to about minus 150.
So I think I was a little too soon on Mississippi State. I was probably a year too soon. I'm not surprised because, like I said at the beginning of the season, they have 26 freshmen, sophomores. They're young, but they have a lot of firepower. And this team is going to be good, I think, next year. I think maybe next year is where they are a real contender and have a real shot. So I was a little too early on Mississippi State. So I think Alabama is really starting to play good baseball. They took it to Florida. They really had a good series with the Gators. So I don't hate that play at all. One I'm looking at for a money line parlay is Texas. I love how Texas has responded. Even though they lost the series to Oklahoma State, that was a back and forth series that is against a really good team. I like Texas to have a nice bounce back win here with Lucas Gordon on the mound, who's pitched really well this year. Kansas State's throwing their best guy, Owen Barima, who's got a 4.1, 3.89, but Kansas State's not in the same class as Texas. And while I'm not laying minus 205 with the Longhorns, I like them in a money line parlay. I like them with an Arkansas. I like them with a Vanderbilt. I like them with even in Alabama. So that is definitely one that I'm looking at. And I suppose the last one here that I really wanted to talk about in terms of like the big teams, it has to be Stanford. Stanford's laying 165 at Cal tonight. I don't love what I'm seeing from the Cardinal, but there are times where you just have to bet Stanford. And I think tonight is one of those times. I'm not sure if Quinn Matthews is on the mound today. I don't know if they're going to keep him on regular rest, but I think Stanford is the side here against California this evening.
Yeah, I laid it with the Cardinal as well. I feel like this is just one of those series that they, can kind of sleepwalk through and pick up. It's just because the Pac-12 is so down, but Cal's never really that great of a baseball team anyway. So I'm with you there on the Cardinal, minus 165.
And last one before we forget, Texas A&M against Auburn. A very weird series here between two teams that are like on the precipice of just falling off the face of the earth. So A&M is a small minus 120 favorite at Auburn, who actually played a really good series against the Gators. I just think Auburn's series was more about Florida just not being able to finish and capitalize. So A&M had a good series win against Ole Miss. They have Nathan Detmer on the mound tonight, I believe, who is their Friday guy, who is a guy who might be a first rounder if he has a strong finish to the year. Minus 120 for A&M for the Aggies, who have some boppers in that lineup. I think that's a fair number against Auburn tonight. I just think Auburn got lucky that they were even in contention to be hanging with Florida the entire series last weekend. So I think it is full Aggies tonight on the money line.
Yeah, it's a stay away from me, but I think it's a coin flip anyways. But, yeah, you've got Detmer going, and then Lampkin is going Friday, Saturday's TBA. So I don't know. Auburn showed some life last week. A&M, I still need to see more before I consistently bet them. So I'll just stay away from it. Root on your
Fair
bet.
enough. It's Matt, it's a big day today. So let's close it out here. Johnny V's Loch Ness Monster. We're going to go Arkansas money line and an Arkansas Vandy money line parlay plus 185. I think those two should come home. No surprises. I think we're looking good for those two SEC teams to, cash some tickets on a Thursday night and a big series opener. So looking forward to those. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter at _JohnnyVTV, Instagram JohnnyVTV_, and TikTok JohnnyVTV. My guy, Matt Grissom, is at Grissom Tweets and mattgrissom.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to Breaking Bet. Be sure to check us out tomorrow, where we're going to be going over everything that we witnessed today, as well as a new series start for teams like Miami, Virginia, and Wake Forest. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Cash some tickets, and best of luck.
I can do this with my eyes closed. It's too easy.